Hello students, today let us discuss the topic levers and its applications. So first of all, let us know what is a lever. So lever is a rigid rod that rotates around one point to move a load by applying a force to a third point. So it is a rigid rod that rotates around one point to move a load by applying a force to a third point. So here you can see different types of levers in this diagram. So a claw hammer, a wheelbarrow, then human arm is also a type of lever, then pilers and nutcracker and sugar tongs are also type of lever. So here you can see the what actually, how does the lever actually work. So there are different classes of lever. So class 1, so here fulcrum in the middle. So you can see there is a fulcrum here, so which is present in the middle of the rod. So this is the rod, okay, and a seesaw is an example, or a crowbar or a pair of scissors is an example for this class 1 levers. Okay, so here the fulcrum is placed between the effort and the load. So fulcrum in the middle, here the fulcrum is positioned between the load and the effort or force. So here fulcrum is between the load and the force. So if the fulcrum which is adjacent to the load, so if the fulcrum is adjacent to the load, then less effort is required to push the load a less distance. So if fulcrum is adjacent to the load, then less effort is required to push the load a less distance. Then if the fulcrum is adjacent to the effort or the force, then more force will be required to push the load a greater distance. So if fulcrum is adjacent to effort, then more effort or more force is required to push the load a greater distance. So a teeter-totter, okay, examples for class 1 are teeter-totter, then a chisel, and Shanghai. So these first class levers are useful for lifting large loads with less effort. So first class or class 1 or class 1 levers are useful for lifting large loads with little effort. Okay. Then class 2 levers. So here the fulcrum or the load is in the middle. So load in the middle. So this is class 1, this is class 2. Okay, here you can see the load is in the middle. This is the force applied and this is the fulcrum. So load in the middle. So the load is positioned in between the force, that is the effort, and the fulcrum. So if the load is adjacent to the fulcrum, than the effort, then less strive will be needed to move the load. So if load is adjacent to the fulcrum, then the effort or force, then less strive will be needed to move the load. But if the load is adjacent to the effort, that is the, here you can see the load is in the middle. But if the load is adjacent to the fulcrum, then the effort that is, it is nearer to the fulcrum than that of the effort, then the strive which is needed will be less to move the load. But if the load is adjacent to the fulcrum, than the effort, adjacent to the fulcrum than the effort, then more strive, that is more stress is will be needed, that is more force will be needed to move or push the load. So examples for class 2 levers is a trolley, then a bottle opener, and blade. So these are the examples for class 2 applications. Class 2 levers. The applications in human body, a second class is used when a person stands on sneaking, that is when a person tiptoes, then this class 2 levers are applied here. So application in the human body, a class 2 lever is used when a person tiptoes. So when he stands on tiptoe. Then the third class or class 3 levers. So here the effort is positioned in between the load and the fulcrum. So force in the middle. The force is positioned in between the load and the fulcrum. So this is the class 3 lever type. So if the fulcrum is adjacent to the load, then less effort is required to push the load. If the fulcrum is adjacent to the load, then less effort is required to push the load. Okay, but if the fulcrum is adjacent to the effort, to the force, then the load will push a large distance. So example here is a pair of pincers. So example is pair of pincers. So these are the different types of levers. Okay, and so we have studied the applications and the types of levers. I hope you have understood the topic. Thank you.